Being a longtime JRPG fan, one of my favorite eras was the PlayStation 2 generation of RPGs, and there's a new game on PS4 called Earthlock Festival of Magic that recaptures those classic JRPG feelings. But is this still an adventure that's worth taking, or is this one game that still ends up missing the mark? Earthlock Festival of Magic is a turn-based JRPG that really feels like it would have fit right at home during the PlayStation 2 era. If you're someone like myself that played a lot of RPGs during the PS2 and early 2000s, playing Earthlock will probably bring back a lot of memories. Hours and hours and overnight playthroughs for great classic series, and that's exactly the kind of feelings I had when going through Earthlock. Well, of course, I'm not going to get into too heavy of spoiler territory, but basically the story revolves around a world that, well, doesn't revolve anymore. Half of the world is covered in ice because there's no sunlight, and the other half is covered in desert because it's too hot, and there's a small area where people can actually live. You control Amon, who is a thief-like character who ends up getting thrust into an adventure after finding an old artifact. There's some typical tropes and JRPG styles of story throughout involving like an evil empire, kidnappings, and of course an ultimate evil that's going on in the world. The game's world isn't vastly huge, it's a little bit of a smaller contained area, but that doesn't mean there isn't plenty to do and to see. There are towns and dungeons and other areas for you to explore, and you can thankfully fast travel easily once you get save points unlocked in each of the new areas as you're going through the game. The game doesn't feature random battles. In fact, you're able to see what enemies are on the map as you're running around, and as you get close, this is one of the cooler aspects, is they will aggro to you, and then you will see a timer start to fill up. If the timer fills, you'll be thrust right into the battle. That point, they will end up having an advantage over you and ambush you. You can initiate the fight at any point yourself by pressing the X button, or try to get away from the enemy if you're trying to not do as many battles, or you're desperately clinging on to life and you want to try to run for it. But what this also allows you to do is to run and get bigger battles to go on. You may only have 2 enemies chasing you as that timer fills, but if you're able to get them to chase you enough, you may run into another pack of enemies. The more enemies in the battle, of course it will be a tougher fight, but you get a lot of bonuses and experience from being outnumbered in battles. The game's battles are turn-based, but it actually makes each button on your controller a different command. You'll use the D-pad to switch between like defensive options, items, and attacks, but when you're selected on each of these, each of your different face buttons becomes different stuff. So your different styles of attacks or different items that you have equipped, and you can actually change this up if you want in the menus, as well as you can change each character's stance. Basically, every character has multiple stances, and this provides either advantages or disadvantages depending upon the style of battle that you're currently in and the types of enemies that you're facing off with. Different characters will have ones, like one is more of a melee style of attack, but you can switch it over, and now they have the ability to fire off a ranged attack. One may have more support magic, and then they have offensive magic with their other stance. You'll have to mix and match to figure out which ones not only work for you, but also which ones are going to help you, especially when it comes to the game's boss fights. Outside of battle, there are side quests for you to complete, items for you to find. There's also this island that you get pretty early in the game that you can travel back to at any point using the save points. And here you're able to craft new items by finding all kinds of random stuff around the world, especially when it comes to ammo that you'll use for your different ranged guns and other elemental stuff. You'll also have the ability to farm. You can plant plants, have to water them, and you'll get different things that way that you can either sell or you can end up using to craft as well. The game doesn't feature your typical equipment for you to get better weapons. Instead, while leveling up, you'll get an increase in stats, but a lot of that's going to come from the talent board. Here, you're able to pretty much select and make each character up the way that you want to by using all kinds of different tiles. Basically, you'll get talent points when you level up, and that'll allow you to place one new tile on your talent board. And these range from, of course, better attack, better defense, better magic, and so on and so forth. And you get to place them and decide which talent points you want to spend on what, and build the characters the way you want, even if they sort of are already leaning in certain different directions. While the story in general wasn't anything groundbreaking, it was the characters and their interactions that ended up making the story more enjoyable as I was going through. One of the cool things is you can also get bonds between the different characters. Having characters in your parties during longer periods of time will unlock new bond moves. These will be like having the ability to poison enemies with attacks or increased stability against certain other things depending upon who you're building a bond between. While playing through Earthlock Festival of Magic, I felt like I was back in high school. I had long nights playing this game all the way until the early morning hours, and time just kind of got away. I really enjoyed going through each of the dungeons, finding new creatures, the battle, and of course, leveling up my characters and seeing where the plot ended up going. From the technical side of things, the game ran pretty smoothly. I didn't run into any crashing. There was a bit of slowdown and a little bit of frame rate drop when I would get into bigger areas and you could see kind of the entire big world that you were currently in depending upon where I was in the game. But overall, it didn't take away from my enjoyment by any means, and it was very minor. Earthlock Festival of Magic is available on the PlayStation 4 for $29.99. It does feature a full trophy list, including a Platinum trophy, and a lot of which will be completing the main game, as well as doing a lot of leveling and some side quests as well, so it'll probably take you a little bit of time in order to get the plat in this one. Earthlock Festival of Magic isn't a extremely flashy JRPG. It's not necessarily an extremely long one either, taking me around 15 to 20 hours in order to complete it on my initial playthrough. However, if you're somebody who appreciates older JRPGs like I do, especially of that 6th generation of consoles, I think you should do yourself a favor and check out Earthlock, at least at some point down the road. I think it'll be well worth your time. With everything said, I'm going to be giving Earthlock Festival of Magic an 8 out of 10. But anyway guys, that's going to wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course I hope you enjoyed.